Irvin Williams. With me is Mr. Elson Lowe, economic advisor to the leader of the opposition, and we're joined by opposition leader Mr. Aubrey Norton, MP, who has just finished presenting to the National Assembly of the Parliament of Guyana on Budget 2024. Mr. Norton, welcome to Conversation on Budget 2024.
Thanks for having me.
A few early points you made in your presentation, striking. You said that we must use our wealth, our national wealth, to build successes and not to promote division. You spoke of developing our human capital, and you said it was essential to our country's development, focused as you were on education when dealing with that. And you talked about promoting and protecting the right of future generations to benefit from our natural resources wealth as a nation. Would you, Mr. Norton, care to emphasize some more? I know you didn't have the luxury of the time that you wanted on these issues, particularly the area of education and how that will help us to achieve these objectives that you set out in your presentation.
At the outset, one has to understand sustainable development. Around 1989, the Bruton Commission produced its report on sustainable development, which implored on us the necessity to ensure that whatever we do not only serves this generation, but prepares and protects future generations. And when you're dealing with a resource like oil, one has to recognize that sustainable development is necessary, or else you can find yourself using out all the resources now, and then when oil is finished, future generations don't have anything. Additionally, once you focus on sustainable development, interwoven into the fabric of which is preparation for future generations, then you would recognize that you have to be very, very careful and ensure as you get oil resources, you also have got to have the mechanism to save, put it in funds, etc., that it can earn interest, etc., so that it protects the future, but also invest it in a sensible way. And that is why I bemoan the fact that the government seemed not to want to get the investment committee of the Natural Resource Fund up and going. Because if that is up and going, then there would be some professionals there who would be able to look at the issues and say, no, this is not sustainable, this is sustainable. And you can have plans that emerge in a structured way. So sustainable development is critical moving forward. Sometimes it is put as intergenerational preparation, meaning that we have to prepare to give future generation a very good life. And that will be critical to what we will do as a political party moving forward.
On that note, as we see the government amend the NRF, it seems like they're preparing to withdraw almost all of the funds in the NRF. You mentioned your concern at the lack of planning by the government that demonstrates amending the NRF only a few years after only a short while after passing it. One of the consistent themes throughout our presentations for this budget is a question of management and governance of both are the affairs of the government and the country more broadly. I wondered if you wanted to elaborate a bit on the government's total disinterest in improving governance in Guyana, in reducing waste, and in delivering really an evidence-based improvement in the standard of life of Guyanese.
The government's desire from the inception, if you look at the reforms that they made to the Natural Resource Fund, all of them were geared to remove oversight, to remove accountability and transparency. So you knew from the inception that they were not seeking to strengthen it so that the resources there are protected. They were seeking to remove the checks and balances so that they can utilize the funds in the way they want to use it without paying any attention to some investment. If you'd listened to the Vice President recently, he virtually said we have no interest in studies and analysis. They are not people who can run a professional economy. It is done in the whims and caprices of the vice president. So one understands the situation. And that is why we have been trying to say to people that there is need for accountability, there's need for transparency. But then in my presentation, I made the point that a journalist asked the president about a plan. And the president said, we don't have a plan. We just make it up as we go along. So we got to gas the shore, and then we get an idea, even if it ain't got any link. We put that idea in place, and then we go to Matthews Ridge or somewhere, and somebody tells us something. And then you can't run a country like that. You need to have clear priorities. And that is the reason why I've identified certain priorities. And I think the key thing here has to be first, the development of the human resource capabilities in the society, because it is the quality of human resource that will determine whether you succeed or not. You have to have mechanisms to have research done, analyses done. You have to be able to look at options, analyze them, and then come up with the correct combination. It's like when the Prime Minister was speaking about energy, it's like he's all over the place. There's nothing which says essentially that our strategy is to use a combination of fossil fuel, wind, solar, and based on its effectiveness and efficiency in particular areas, we will allocate, we will put it there. But if it is not suitable, then we wouldn't. But it is just like, oh, we distributing solar panels. Oh, we're distributing whatever. Now, a lot of coal communities might not be suitable. Some of them might not be suitable solar panel. And there are communities where there's a lot of breeze that wind energy might suit. So you have to, again, have your feasibility study, be able to measure what you set out to do and its impact, and then implement. This government specializes in ad hocery. They do everything in an ad hoc way rather than based on a plan of some kind. And that is why I said in my presentation that it's not the first time they're telling us they can bring down the cost of electricity. Scared was to bring it down. It's not the first time they're telling us that their programs can give widespread access to the programs will give widespread access to internet connectivity. They told us with the fiber optic cable, and then they stopped talking about it when it failed. And I understand they're transferring in more the packaging plant into some center for studies or something. This is a manifestation of the lack of planning. No wonder the IMF concluded that 41% of all this goes into wastage. So that is where we are.
I want to follow up on what you just said regarding wastage and Elson's reference to drawing down to zero on the Natural Resource Fund. You mentioned in your presentation that the government was doing two things. One, borrowing as much as it was wasting, and wasting as much as 41% of capital projects. What is that going to do to the rights of future generations to benefit from our natural resources wealth? And is there any safeguard that you would recommend to the government immediately? And while you're at it, can you offer our viewing public the alternatives that you have in mind in that regard?
Well, what they will do is what I would say they should do, the alternatives I have in mind. For instance, we should go back to a natural resource fund in which there is broad-based participation, the regions, the private sector, professional people, so that it's not just a case of a vice president at his whims and fancies deciding what happens. That's one of the first measures, to have the committees running the National Resource Fund being broad-based, to have professionals on the investment committee, so that it can happen in a particular way. The other thing I would say to them, they need a petroleum commission. We have said that regularly. That will go a far way in ensuring that sensible decisions are made, there are checks and balances, and we can move forward. Clearly, the government has no interest in structures that will check them. They want total control. And as they go down this role of total control, and as they pluck schemes from the skies, what they are doing is putting together a hodgepodge of projects that will result in the emptying of the natural resource fund, and then the future generations would be in trouble. They are not even showing that they have an interest in developing new industries, as I pointed out, so that apart from relying on oil and gas, you're preparing the basis for post oil and gas by having new industries identified and resources put into developing those industries so that you diversify the economy and create this opportunity for future generations to benefit. We talk about the stock exchange, which is one avenue that can be used to ensure people access resources and do the things that are needed. So clearly, like I said in the presentation, the economy has changed, but the thinking hasn't. And when the thinking has not changed, then the measures that will come as a result of old thinking will act as a fetter to the new economy, and therefore does not allow the economy to develop in the way it should develop.
Absolutely. You touched in your presentation on the healthcare system and the government's focus on building new hospitals, but but lack of focus on compensation of nurses and training of nurses. I don't know if you want to touch a bit on the way that the government is looking at managing the healthcare sector, where it seems that they're looking to build, but don't have in mind what exactly their goals are.
In both the health and education sector, the focus is on infrastructure. The problems to be solved, they are infrastructural problems to be solved. But solving the health and educational problems are not solely reliant on the building of these buildings. Yes, you have to build buildings. Yes, you have to rehabilitate buildings. But like I said, the biggest problem we have in the education and the health sector is our inability to retain staff. The other problem we have is the quality of staff. There is no structured approach to retraining people and improving their productivity levels. Those are things that are necessary if you're going to do what we're doing. And that is why we recommended a task force to look at the training and retaining of nurses, the training and retaining of teachers. But I also said in that presentation that you have to create conditions propitious to people wanting to stay. People want improved status. People want more money. People want a work environment that is conducive. I believe there are some measures we are going to identify that will help nurses and teachers. I have restrained myself from identifying some of them now, because if we do that, next year they will come with them under a different name. Many of the things, some of the things they are doing are things that came from the AP and UAFC. They changed their names, and then the problem in education is not only in school. You already have these children that would have dropped out of school, and the budget has nothing to deal with them. And the recommendations I made in the budget are aimed at dealing with them. You have out there thousands of children who have not matriculated, who do not have 5 CXC with math and English. You have some out there that have no hope of doing CXC and math of English, but you have no technical and vocational program at the community-based level to take care of those children. GTI has been there for years, GITC, but the rate at which this economy, and this is the point we made, they have not looking at the changes in our economy. The rate of change in this economy will not allow us to train the people we want through GTI, and I'm not here bashing them. We need them, GITC, NATI, the trade school in London, but we need to expand it. We need to have more community-based training. And then even with these institutions, a lot of people cannot afford And that is why I said you have to incentivize the young people so that they want to go in that direction. Another thing that can be used is live-in accommodation so that students who live far and lack the resources to be able to go to these programs can live in, funded by government, and get the training. I keep saying there's need for a comprehensive approach to our human resource development. There's need for proper mechanisms to incentivize our teachers, our health workers, and the wider youth population.
Mr. Norton, on the last occasion, Budget 2023, you had made in your presentation a call for, I think it's about 20 policy positions to be taken to bring home good governance and development. Some of them have found their way into Budget 2024 very quietly. And on this occasion, you have identified the 8 priority areas, immediate priority areas. And I'd list those for the benefit of our viewers if you missed the presentation. 1, alleviating and ending poverty and a guaranteed livable income. 2, defense and security.
No, you missed one. I dealt with
Combating the high cost of
Of
living.
living.
And then 3, defense and security. And 4, skills development and job placement. 5, increasing Guyana's percentage share of oil revenues. 6, national teachers and nurses workforce action plan. 7, youth development. 8, expansion of the productive capacity of the economy. I suspect, Mr. Norton, that increasing Guyana's percentage share of oil revenues will be the most topical of these 8 priority areas among citizens of Guyana. Would you like to expand on that one for us, please?
Well, like I said, we already have an oil and gas. The major challenge facing us is the technical competence to manage the sector. So what we're saying, first of all, is that we must acknowledge that we lack the technical capabilities. To deal with that, we should hire a company or companies that can help us. But we must simultaneously train our people so that we don't become totally reliant on these companies throughout the years. So we need to train our people. We need to train them to audit. We need to train them to monitor. We need to train them to be involved in the sector so that in the final analysis, Guyanese play a significant role in the development of the oil and gas sector. I'm aware of our limitations, especially as it relates to drilling offshore. So what I'm saying in gist is we need to benefit more. I consistently say that the contract has a mechanism for government to engage ExxonMobil to make the changes that are needed. We will prepare our case and engage Exxon with the aim of negotiating to ensure that we get the best deal. We are aware that Exxon is pursuing its interests. It is therefore incumbent on the government to pursue the people of Ghana's interest. And that is what we will do in the circumstance.
Absolutely. During your remarks, you mentioned that the cost of living, small businesses, the need for investment in small businesses, and the question of competition. I just want to know if you wanted to elaborate again for those who are viewing on the government's lack of a focus on small businesses and on promoting competition and its effect on the cost of living.
The government wants to ensure that it continues to control the allocation of resources. It wants to ensure that it is the determiner. Now, but while they talk about developing a liberal economy, they are avoiding competition. But competition is critical. If you have more industries coming, more companies and firms coming in, then you will have more producers, and therefore competition will emerge. One of the advantages of competition is that it helps to bring down price. And so if the government is serious about developing the kind of economy that is resilient and competitive, then it should shift away, begin the process of shifting away from a state controlled economy. Because even though a lot of the companies are involved in the economy, the economy is still in large measure state controlled, state dominated, not from the standpoint of ownership, but from the standpoint of allocation of resources, which is what is critical in terms of putting resources into various areas to ensure they develop. Excuse me. So what I'm saying in this is that there is need to first educate people on competition, put the mechanism in place for competition, and then constantly grow the private sector and engage young people so that they become involved in business, so that we truly begin to develop an economy in which there is competition, which will redound to the benefit of the people through lower prices and other opportunities.
Mr. Norton, time is going, and I know you must be a bit tired after a marathon presentation. But there's a governance issue that I'd like to raise with you.
I like how you diplomatically tell me I forgot the governance issue.
No. I think Mr. Roysdale Ford, MP, did an excellent job on governance. Yeah, but what's happening now is that the president of this country is out of the jurisdiction. And Article 96 of the Constitution speaks to the appointment of persons to perform the functions of president in his absence. The usual pick is the prime minister. And of course, there's a rank of seniority. And in the case that we have before us right now, we have a senior minister of government who has been sworn to perform the functions of president while the prime minister is still in the country. Is this unprecedented to the best of your memory? And if it is so, is it a form of erosion of the democratic tenets that we subscribe to, or constitutional provisions?
I think it is not the correct thing to do. I think it was wrong. I think the prime minister should have been acting as president at this stage. You know, one of the things I did in this budget was to engage Roysdale Ford and ask him to lay out the governance architecture, which he did excellently. And I did that because one of the critical shortcomings of this government is the lack of good governance. They do not govern properly. And so I thought it fit that we put it out there, all the elements of poor governance that are occurring. And I think Roysdale did an excellent job of putting them there. And then in this budget, I reassigned Christopher Jones to deal with parliamentary affairs. And again, he showed all the flaws in his presentation of the government not adhering to parliamentary procedures. So governance is an issue for the government generally. It is difficult for them to be practicing bad governance generally and then practice good governance in the political party. So to me, it is like a logical sequel of their poor governance that has caused this situation in which you have somebody acting as president who shouldn't be. But then it is not restricted to that. One of the first things I did when I became opposition leader was to point out to them that this constitution says that the first vice president
It's the prime minister.
is the prime minister, and the government refuses to give him the nomenclature, prime minister and first vice president, because they want to create the conditions for the vice president, Barajak, there to do as he is doing. And so governance, good governance is not something that is in the same corner with the People's Progressive Party. They prefer to be distant from it.
But what does this say to our students, or high school and university students? what does it say for aspiring prime ministerial candidates in the People's Progressive Party, for example, where the contempt is profound? Here is the prime minister, who is the first vice president in the country, not sick. You know, the constitution speaks to physical or mental infirmity being an impediment to discharging the functions and so on. But he's there.
Look, let me say this to you. The Prime Minister himself went out of the way to try to suggest that he's comfortable with it. What it says is that future persons who want to be Prime Minister has to have more self-worth and self-respect. That's all I'd say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norton. You have been watching this Budget 2024 conversation with the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Aubrey, National Congress and Leader of the Opposition. Our guest, I'm Mervyn Williams. On behalf of myself and Elson Lowe, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back with more conversations on Budget 2024 as the estimates will be considered during the course of next week. Thank you very much for staying with us.